Hey everyone, this is Zephyr, and welcome to the Bailiwiki channel, where we teach everyday DMs how to create truly amazing experiences for their players by combining art and technology. Today, we're revisiting our ultimate automation suite for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition in Foundry VTT. This suite focuses on combat specifically for 5th edition, and so if you want your combats to be snappy, beautiful, and easier to keep track of, then this is the video for you. With this list, you'll be able to have all of your damages, saves, hits, etc. applied automatically, and it's going to help bookkeep a lot of great things, such as concentration or opportunity attacks and people leaving threatened areas. And in addition to making all of your combat so much smoother and easier to manage with your players, it's going to look gorgeous too. There are a lot of fantastic animations and visual effects tied to all of these features, weapons, spells that you and your players are going to be using. So with all of this in place, your combat is going to feel snappier, it's going to be absolutely stunning, and you and your players are going to be able to focus more on actually playing the game and telling stories together at the table. If that all sounds good to you, then we will be covering today first our modules and requirements, then our initial settings and setup, followed by a discussion of some of our optional modules and their settings. With setup out of the way, we'll cover importing characters and then importing monsters using D&D Beyond. Then we go over some alternatives for automating these features and monsters without using D&D Beyond, and also cover how to update all of those features, whether you import them with D&D Beyond or not. Sprinkled throughout that is also going to be conversations on how to customize these features for you and your players. Finally, we'll wrap things up with a little demo for you to take a look at and see some of this in action. And with that, let's dive right in. For the required and recommended modules, rather than have a brick of text in our description or having you pause to scroll through as we go on the video, we've created this great spreadsheet for you. This is going to be linked down in the description below, and we've got a lot of different information here. Basically, if it's required, that is what we're considering the core list here if you want the same experience with this ultimate automation suite. There are notes up at the top on these columns explaining any specific annotations. For example, what these pick ones mean. They mean go to the family column and see that these are doing the same job, all our role requests, and you pick your favorite out of those to handle that particular function. We've also got indications of whether it's a free module, a paid module, or a free module with a paid option involved, links to the Foundry VTT pages, and along with that, we have names that should cause the correct modules to pop up when you're searching for them in the install module browser. Families are organized by, in terms of the automation suites, the big ones and their dependencies. So for example, we are mainly using Midi, Chris's Premades, and Gambit's Premades. And so those all have families here with themselves and their core dependencies and recommended modules. There's also description over here that has information on what each of these modules do. It's a very short description, so it's not comprehensive, but it gives you the gist. This is particularly useful when you're down here looking at the optional modules and deciding what you want to use there. In terms of the main things that we're going to be using today, again, we're going to be using Midi-QoL and its entire suite of modules that it requires and recommends, Chris's Premades, Gambit's Premades, then automated animations, and include with that is also going to be the DnD5e animations module in order to populate all of our non-SRD content. And then we also are going to be using D&D Beyond Importer. You do not strictly have to use the D&D Beyond Importer, but it does make for a very smooth and easy experience. When it comes to the D&D Beyond Importer, you do not need to have a premium subscription in order to support your players or be able to update monsters that you already have. It is, however, necessary in order to bring in monsters in bulk from your D&D Beyond account. So if you are using the D&D Beyond Importer and you want to bring in monsters, or if you're bringing in adventures and you want to bring in the monsters with those adventures, then you will need to support Mr. Primate on Patreon. Other than that, all of these modules are either going to be free or there is an alternative to the premium versions for free. For example, JB2A, you can use either their free module or you can use their Patreon module. Both will work here. You'll just get a few extra animation options for the premium version. Once we have all of our modules installed and enabled, it's time to go into our settings and do some configurations. First, in core, we're going to go to open permission configuration, and there's 3 main settings we want to make sure that our players, and by extension, our trusted players, have access to. First is configure token settings. Then is going to be create new tokens. And again, you want to make sure that it's on for both your players and your trusted players if you have any. And then finally, you want to make sure the use file browser is enabled. This is mainly for warp gate and sequencer settings so that they can fire properly. After your core settings, you're going to want to go into Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, and then scroll down to this disable concentration tracking, and you want to turn that on. We're going to be using MIDI for handling that. Otherwise, we have some double dipping on concentration handlers. So go ahead and just disable this. And then I would recommend saving your changes, because otherwise MIDI looks at some of the settings when you go to save your workflow and can change a couple bits on the concentration if you don't already have this disabled. So save changes and then reopen your configure settings. And we're going to move on down the list. Next up on our list, we've got DnD5e animations. If you didn't already get this update menu, you can come into your game settings and launch it here. And this is going to have all of these different effects that are going to be updated so that you have the animations for all of the non-SRD content. If you click on this and it says there's nothing to update, then you're already good to go and you've already done the import process. After that, we want to go ahead and check out Levels Automatic Cover Calculator. That's the cover calculator we're using for this one. If you're using alternative token cover or symbols, then you want to review the specific settings for that. For Levels Automatic Cover Calculator, I'm going to set this to library mode, and this is going to mean that basically everything from here down doesn't matter. And I'm also going to turn off this show cover message when targeting. It's a library mode feature that basically puts something in the chat whenever something gets targeted. This can cause a lot of chat messages when you're moving around templates, so I prefer to have that off. After levels, we're going to go ahead and head over to Midi-QoL, and we've got a lot to do here. First things first, you want to make sure in your main settings you've got this enable role automation support selected. It should be on by default, but just double check that it is. Then you're going to click on workflow settings, and that's where the bulk of this is going to be. The easiest way to get started is go to quick settings and select your preference. I would highly recommend starting with full automations, and then you can kind of learn and go through and figure out what things you want to change afterwards. But full automation is a really good place to start. After that, we'll go back into our workflow, and we're going to be looking under the workflow tab of the workflow settings. And first, we're going to look at specials. And we want to make sure that this says the apply item effects, and then if absent, apply convenient effects. The reason being is that we're going to bring in a bunch of automated items, and those are usually going to have effects that we want to apply rather than convenient effects, but occasionally they might not have those item effects set up, so instead we'll do the convenient effects then. Next, we will scroll down to hits here, and we want to make sure that the roll separate attack per target is turned off. Again, it should be off by default, but just make sure that it is. And then on saves, you want to have this prompt players to roll saves, and you want to select the roll request handler that you're using for this module. So I'm going to use Monk's token bar, so just make sure you have that set to your roll requester of choice. Next, we'll head into the miscellaneous section here. And under miscellaneous, we need to make sure that we have this add actor on use macro to sheet and add item on use macro to sheet. Both of those should be ticked on. Again, by default, those are on, but just make sure that they are. Same thing with merge roles to one card. If those are all good, we're heading over to mechanics. Then on mechanics, got this walls block ranged attacks, and you can set that to your cover calculator of choice. Again, we're using levels auto cover here, but if you're using symbols or alternative token cover, then go ahead and select that here. And for calculate cover, you want to make sure that this matches your walls block ranged targets as well. Then another quick setting that I want to shout out here is this auto reroll initiative. This is where every round, every combatant rerolls their initiative. As it says in this warning, you can break round and turn effect expirations. Since we're using so much automation, I highly recommend that you never turn this on. If you want to do different things with initiative, then you might need to explore ways of changing up how these turn and round effects expire. But it's generally a lot of headache for it. So then we're going to go ahead and save our settings for MIDI. Once we're done in MIDI, we're going to scroll up to the D&D Beyond importer, and we need to go into our core setup, and we need to put in our Cobalt cookie first and foremost. The Cobalt cookie is D&D Beyond's kind of unique identifier for each user, and you can reference that in order to determine what content that person has access to. So the importer needs that to be able to bring in the appropriate things and not get any trouble with piracy, etc. So for here, there's two ways you can go about it. Mr. Primate has created a Chrome extension, and there's also the DDB data grabber utility that you can use, or you can click on this to follow some manual steps that involve using the inspection tool in the console of your web browser. However you get that, you can go ahead and paste your Cobalt cookie in. Once it is pasted in, you won't need to do it again on this server. It will be ready to go whenever you launch a new world, etc. It's stored in your kind of local server data rather than a per world data. Then you can also select different campaigns or fetch campaigns that are shared with you in case you have some kind of content sharing with that. I don't, so I'm going to leave that blank. And then if you're a supporter of Mr. Primate on Patreon, you get access to some additional features from the D&D Beyond importer. For our purposes, the most important thing that you get being a patron is the Monster Muncher, or the importer for all of your monsters from D&D Beyond that will come in with all of the nice automation. We can go ahead and click on this Detect Patreon status. It's going to open up an API widget with Patreon to link through this. Should automatically close and link things, but if not, it will also give you a key you can copy and paste into Foundry. And then you'll just need to save. And you can verify that you have all of that set up by clicking on Core Setup again, and it will tell you your user email and also your tier and whether it's valid or not. You can also use the check Cobalt cookie here to make sure that all of that is correct. After the D&D Beyond importer, we want to go into DFreds Convenient Effects. And for the Modify Status section, we want to change this to Add. Normally, we would want this to be replaced. However, DFreds Convenient Effects has not been updated for DnD5e version 3.1 yet, and so some of the concentration effects don't quite work right. So we want it to be Add rather than Replace. So just have that one set up as Add. Next up, we have Gambit's Premades, our new addition here. And the main thing you want to know here is if you want to configure any homebrew options. And then there's also the Enable Opportunity Attack, Counterspell, etc. All these different reaction pieces. And then also what the timeout is. If you want to keep parity with the default settings from Midi-QoL, it's 30 seconds. So you can change all of these to 30 seconds, and it will match the reaction prompting that happens for Midi-QoL, such as when you have some kind of reaction-based feature, etc. So you can go ahead and turn on any of these that you want to use. And then, of course, if you want to adjust these in Midi-QoL as well, they are going to be in the reaction section of your workflows. After Gambit's Premades, we're going to go to our final required settings here, and it's going to be for Chris's Premades. We're going to get into exactly how Chris's Premades works a little bit here as well, so we're not just going to go over the settings, but in terms of settings that we need to make sure we turn on immediately, we're going to go into the compendium settings, and you can see there's Gambit's Premade support and MIDI item showcase community support. You want to turn both of these on and decide whether you want to include or exclude Homebrew and Unearthed Arcana, etc. And then you should be good to go on that front. Then we want to scroll down to our module integration. And for module integration, we basically want to turn on almost all of these. So we want to have these automatic VAE descriptions and VAE temporary buttons. And we want to use DnD5e animation sounds. If you're using Dice So Nice, then turn on the Dice So Nice compatibility. If you're using Spotlight OmniSearch, also turn that on, etc. Basically, if you're using the module, you should probably turn it on. And I highly recommend for all of these colorize options, you turn these on. What that does is when you look at the title bar for an item, you will see that there are a variety of different pieces on there. So we'll reload and we'll take a quick look at that before we hop back into settings. So you can see here on this item sheet for Black Razor that there are multiple icons up here from the various modules we've got going on. And this DAE and AA are colorized. Normally just the medkit here for Chris's Premades would be colorized. So that's just helpful for looking at a glance, seeing what's going on an item without having to open each of these and see like, okay, this is blank, that's not helpful. Okay, this has something, etc. So colorizing it is really useful for at a glance if you're making customizations. By no means do you have to do this, but it just makes it a lot easier when working with these pieces. Returning to our settings, you also probably want to check out the homebrew section, decide how you want any of those to be handled. There's things like the Baldur's Gate 3 weapon actions. If you've played the video game, you know that different weapons have extra actions beyond just regular attack. Those can be added in, etc. So take a look at those. If you have players that are using manual dice rolls, then you'll want to check out this manual rolling section. For instance, if your players are rolling physical dice at home and then telling you over voice or whatever what their results were, then these are the settings you want to take a look at. Then there's also the backups section, and basically you can use this to store backups of characters so that if an update happens and you update the system early or there's some breaking change to the module, etc., you can roll back and have these saved versions of your characters, etc. So you can set that up, and I would recommend that you do so to make sure that you don't lose any of that data, especially if you have really complex characters and are playing a lot in the world. For the rest of our Chris's Premade settings, these are going to be specific automations and functions to turn on and enable certain different effects. So some of these are going to be on by default. The rest will need to be turned on for all of the automations to work. I would highly suggest that you do not just turn all of these on blindly unless you know for sure that you're going to need them, because these are basically all additional listeners, and while it's not likely to have a large performance impact, it is not good practice to have all these extra listeners going on. So you probably want to keep it to just the necessities that you've got going on. Additionally, I brought in our old friend Gomer here, and he is going to be fighting a bandit right now. And when Gomer is going to use a feature that requires a certain setting for Chris's Premades, it's going to go ahead and actually ask for that. So for example, if I activate this Guardian armor here, it's going to give me a pop-up saying enable required settings. It's going to tell me what those settings are. So you can either go into the settings to do that, or you can just click on the enable. You'll notice if we go into our general, now this short long rest listener setting is turned on. So you don't actually have to think through and double check what settings are needed before you need to use the automation. You just have to basically click it twice. So now if I click on this again, it's going to modify Gomer a bit, and we've got some new features and everything. And you can see that now we've got these Thunder Gauntlets, etc. So that's working just fine. Similarly, if we go into spells and I try to use Booming Blade, it's going to have this enable required settings, and we'll go ahead and turn it on. And then if we use Booming Blade, it will fire the whole macro and script here for us. So we're able to do all of that together. And we're starting off our demonstrations with a bang here. So with all of these settings, I would in general just go ahead and wait for yourself to be prompted, or maybe do a quick test with the player characters on a scene on your own without your players actually being in your server for this, and then check what settings you need to turn on. You can, for some things, for example, spells, okay, I know so-and-so has Fog Cloud. I know so-and-so has Mirror Image. You can go through the line of those, same thing with feats and class features. But other than the things that you have top of mind, I wouldn't try to guess it or research it heavily beforehand. I would just maybe set up a test session where you check and turn on those things, or you let players know that, hey, some of these I might have to change a setting really quick for. Just be prepared to click the button twice if I tell you to. And that's going to be all of our core settings done and dusted. Let's run through some optional modules and their settings really quick. So first up, we've got simple calendar. We're mainly using this for keeping track of time, but if you want to use it for also managing the passage of time in terms of days, weeks, etc. in your game, then you want to come into your settings. There's a quick setup for different calendars that automatically set up your year, month, weekday, leap year, etc. for you, so it's all ready to go. Then we're using SmallTime as one of our optional modules. This basically adds a nice little widget that we can turn on that allows us to advance time very quickly here. After SmallTime, we also have the custom character sheets module. You don't necessarily need any settings for that, but if we go into, say, Gomer here, and we look at his inventory or his features, we can go ahead and put things on here. When we go to edit this, there is a section down here called custom section, and we can name this whatever we want. So example section, for instance. And it's going to go ahead and create a new section below all of our other sections in our inventory that is going to include everything that has example section in that little field here. As you can see, if I spell it exactly the same, it's going to pop down there. Where this is useful is especially when you get into later levels of play and maybe you just have so many features. Some of them you need to have as a reference. Some of them you need to know, okay, I have a thing that I do with this. Like I have magical tinkering and I use that every now and then. I need to be able to go check, see where the things I have actually have uses and I'm going to leverage mechanically are. And also where there's things where like I don't care. I don't need to look at this basically ever again because it's just like, I have spellcasting. Cool. I don't really need to reread my spellcasting anytime. So you can do things like set up, say for an artificer, maybe you have your infusions as a specific feature section down here, or if you're a warlock, you can organize all of your eldritch invocations in one spot to be able to see what all of those do. So really helpful for organization. And it also has some support with Chris's Premades and D&D Beyond Importer, where it will make some of those custom sections, particularly for things that add additional features to your sheet. And speaking of sheets, the cleaner sheet title bar is listed as an optional module, but is dang near mandatory if you're running this many modules. You'll notice this black razor that we showed off earlier has a much cleaner look up here at the top. Basically, most of these would have some kind of text immediately after them with their icon from earlier. And now all that text is going to be completely hidden thanks to cleaner sheet title bar, giving you a much cleaner look. Sometimes if you have a lot of these icons and there's all this text, you actually have to resize before you can close these windows. So it's really nice to avoid that particular headache and also just give you a nice clean look, because after just a little bit of familiarity, you'll know what each of these buttons are, and many of them you won't actually have to reference very frequently. So it's kind of a must-have module in our eyes. Our next two optional modules kind of go hand in hand. They are Dice So Nice that we already kind of saw earlier, and then Dice Tray. Notice that I'm down here clicking and right-clicking to change this roll formula that's automatically generated for me. I don't have to remember how to type all this out. And then Dice So Nice gives us these beautiful 3D dice. Of course, you and your players can customize your Dice So Nice settings to be specific to you, etc. You can adjust your rollable area, all that good stuff. It's a great bit of eye candy, and it's really nice to, at the table, see when someone gets that big nat 20 that you really need. A little more on the combat interface side of things. We've got two more here. First up, we're going to go ahead and toggle the combat state, and we have this beautiful combat tracker up here at the top. And this is going to be Carousel Combat Tracker from Ripper. It's really customizable, and it's a nice visual way to look at things rather than popping out the combat tracker here or going over to the tab for it. And then we're also using a Token HUD. We discussed those at length in an earlier video, so you can check out some of our recommendations for the 4 best Token HUDs that we could find. We're using Argon here today as a demonstration, but a Token HUD is incredibly helpful for you and your players, basically keeping up with the pace of combat, knowing what you have available instead of cluttering up half of your screen with a character sheet, or in the case of a GM, your entire screen with several character sheets. So these are both highly recommended for keeping things organized. Sticking with combat, if you decided to enable Gambit's Premades attack of opportunity system, then you may notice when you hit begin combat that these templates show up around the characters. And this is basically what's bookkeeping the attack of opportunity system. It's these different templates. So if we actually go to the point where the player is going to move away from the NPC, it's going to prompt the opportunity attack here. But if you don't like these templates, have no fear. There are some options for dealing with that. The first ingredient to hiding the opportunity attack templates is the walled templates module. If you come into the settings here, you can go ahead and hide things like the template border and template highlighting when you don't have the template control going. You don't strictly need to have these on, I have found in my experience, but it does make it a little bit more consistent sometimes. And then we're going to go into token magic effects, and we are going to disable the enable auto template effects, which may be slightly disappointing considering on what you're running. However, it is worth bearing in mind that we have so many automated animations going on that you're still going to have really beautiful templates, etc. And then we are going to go ahead and turn off the default template grid on hover and the automatically hide template elements. We're going to pass all that off over to walled templates to be able to handle that. After you've saved your changes, then when we go ahead and begin combat, there's not going to be any templates that you can see. However, if we go ahead and get it to where everyone has their reactions, and we have the player character walk up and walk away, it's still going to provoke the attack of opportunity, so those templates are hidden if they bother you. Before we move on to actually realizing our automation dreams and start bringing in some characters, let's also go over a few resources for if you're having issues. In the Midi-QoL settings, there is a troubleshooter here that is going to give you kind of a general report on if there's anything that you need or if there are any particular settings that are important to double check. You can use this rather than going into the workflow settings to see what they're at. You can also see common modules, whether they're installed or not, and if they are on incorrect versions, etc. And then you've also got problems. You can use this to figure out if there's actually issues. For example, I know that the fact that there is an actor or a token on the scene that doesn't have an actor is not an issue because we remove those links here. That's not a problem. It's not being used for combat. No worries. You can also check out specific error callouts here if there's anything like that. It also has an export data, which is really helpful for heading over to the Midi-QoL Discord where you can get some additional help. Then also Chris's Premades has a similar feature here. It's got a help section. You can take a tour of the module in case you need refreshers. You can automatically apply recommended setting fixes. And there is a troubleshooter that's going to get some spit out here that, again, you can save to a file or copy to a clipboard or even open directly to the Discord support channel for Chris's Premades. As we've intimated, there are some really good Discord resources here. Chris's Premades has a Discord dedicated to itself where they hang out, and you can get some help over there if you're having issues or file bug reports, etc. And then Tim Posney, author of Midi-QoL, has kind of the mecca of automation discords. It's got information for all of his modules, so that's Midi-QoL and all of its dependencies like DAE and Times Up, etc. But it's also got hubs for other automation suites such as Gambit's, Premades, etc. Particularly if you are looking to customize or create your own automations, that is a great place to get some help. Finally, of course, you can always pop by the BaileyWiki Discord. We're not the authors of these modules and we're not experts in customizing them, but we can help out where we can or point you in the right direction. So with all of our setup complete, it's time to start bringing some automated characters. First, we're going to go ahead and open up this character that I've already created. Nothing about this sheet matters right now. You can see it's named example. It's got nothing everywhere. If you go into its inventory, it's even got some junk like those 2 breastplates and black razor, etc. But there's nothing else important going on here. You could also obviously just create a brand new actor and use that. But what I'm trying to show here is that there is nothing that is important on this particular sheet of data. When I turn the edit mode, I now get this D&D Beyond button. And I can use this to then copy and paste in the link for a D&D Beyond character that I have pulled up on my other screen. And this is going to give me all of these import options. I can go through these tabs, and these are mainly personal preference, like if you want to update back to update D&D Beyond, or when you're importing things, if, for example, I'm importing a character named Gomer Prest Newberry, if that name is maybe a little lengthy on D&D Beyond, and I want to just use, say, I named them Gomer, maybe I want to turn off some of these update selections, etc. Or if you're updating back and forth with D&D Beyond, maybe you don't want to bother tracking currency or something between D&D Beyond and Foundry. then those are what you can turn off there. Then the important tab we have here is going to be automation. The main things you want here is you want to make sure that you have the generate automation effects, these top 3, and these are going to be kind of the main things that the D&D Beyond importer is bringing in and shoring up. And then finally, we have use automation effects from Chris's Premades module. And this is going to bring in, basically, it will bring in D&D Beyond's automated version that they've come up with, unless there's something from Chris's Premades, in which case we'll prefer Chris's Premades. This is also why it was important for us to set our compendiums to also include the Midi-QoL community showcase and also Gambit's Premades, because then that's how those are getting pulled in, is by leveraging this automation effects from Chris's Premades module. Under the advanced section, just a quick note. If for whatever reason your player has access to different content than you or something like that, you're not sharing campaign, all that jazz, you can add a player-specific Cobalt cookie and Patreon key from this advanced section. But once you've done all of that, you can go ahead and hit Start Import, and it's going to bring in your character data. After a little bit of processing, you'll start to see behind you that the sheet has changed, and now we have Gomer Press Newberry, a 6th level artificer who is a rock gnome, and the former captive background. All of his proficiencies are in here, his ability scores are updated, he is good to go. If you look in his inventory, that adamantium breastplate is nowhere to be found, so even the old junk in there has been cleaned out. And we've got all of this great automation in here, and we're ready to start using it. And you can start seeing that right away. You'll notice on all the items in an inventory that there is a little Chris's Premades med bag here. It looks like a chest or a bag with a plus sign on it. So it's the med kit for Chris's Premades. There's a lot of different colors here. There are 3 really important ones to look out for. If it's white, that means that there is neither automation present nor automation available for this particular item. There may be other icons that are lit up indicating that there is some automation present, but Chris's Premades isn't handling that at all. That's something worth keeping in mind because some of the things for Chris's Premades will replace by name. So if the name doesn't match right, it's going to think that there's no automation when there might actually be some. Yellow indicates that there is automation available. So if you click on it, then you'll notice that you have this update replace item, and an update replace will be available pretty much anytime you click on that, but it might not actually find anything, etc. Then red will indicate that it's out of date. This particularly happens if, say, you went from a 5e version 2 point something rather world to updating it to version 3.x. And then you have the old automation still on there and it's broken. So you just need to look for that red, and then that means you need to update it. This might also happen if they change how the automations work in between versions. Then there are a whole host of other colors which indicate what library they are from. There's a list of those on the Chris's Premade Discord. We're not going to go through them here today. One thing that's worth keeping in mind, especially with some of these like very character-specific features, is if you click on this and nothing seems to happen, and especially if you click on this and then it's saying that previous roles haven't finished yet, what you may want to do is go ahead and discard that, and you may need to actually have your character out and targeted in order to do things like this Arcane Guardian armor. And we can go ahead and discard our previous. And now you'll notice that we have the Guardian Armor defensive field, and if we go into our inventory, we now have these Thunder Gauntlets. So that is all completely set up and ready to go. So it's just a quick demonstration of how we are completely ready to rock. We'll go ahead and pop open our Combat HUD here, and we will use the spell Booming Blade. And as we mentioned earlier, we already have the settings configured for that because when we bring it in, it'll tell us what we need. And then now this poor bandit is already dead, but in the instance that he was still alive, there's even the prompt for Booming Blade to say, did he move willingly or not? And then it's going to roll damage for Booming Blade that way. So it's all working fantastically right out of the box with a pretty cool character. So with just that quick import, we're already pretty much ready to go. There's just a few things to keep in mind. For example, for this character in particular, if we're using the Arcane Armor Guardian model, we actually have to have the character out and targeted in order to apply that. There may also be some other spells that you need to apply settings for. We did already enable our rest monitoring and our Booming Blade settings earlier when we were going through settings and demonstrating that, But in case you missed that, if we go to apply mirror image, we'll see that we actually need to have this mirror image automation turned on. Another great thing you'll notice is that I clicked on that and the automation isn't ready. It didn't even bother to ask me if I want to use my spell slots or not, so you don't have to worry about your players burning their spell slots and feeling bummed about having to double click that, etc. So you can just enable the required settings and click mirror image, and then it will give you the prompt for the casting the spell at what level and applying it. You can see we've also got this great visual effect from automated animations. Of course, this version of Gomer doesn't have quite as handsome of a token, so we can probably fix that as well. I'm back and I've updated Gomer's new look. For reference, I did not actually have to change anything or redo anything with his mirror image. All I had to do was just change his appearance so that the token is actually the correct art. And then let's say that for whatever reason, the mirror image is done, whether it's concentration or not. With visual active effects, we can just right click on it and then we'll get a prompt to delete the active effect. And if so, it'll end. And that also includes all of our nice animations. Just to reiterate how easy that was and give a demonstration of what another kind of character looks like, let's go ahead and bring in another one. So again, the name does not matter at all. I even just mashed my keyboard here. I'm just going to turn on my edit. I'm going to go into D&D Beyond, and I'll paste in the link for another character. This is going to be our old friend, Ventress Galewright. After that be processing, here is Ventress. Now, as I learned earlier, I may want to go ahead and go into my appearance for the prototype token and change that to whatever image I want to use for the token, rather than just relying on the import from D&D Beyond. Of course, you can leave that alone if you prefer. Then we'll just update our token. And now we have this great character ready to rock. So we drop him in. He is all good to go. A couple of things to watch out for whenever you're doing any of these. You'll notice that when I brought in Ventress, these little pips above his portrait are not filled for Argon. That is kind of the canary in the coal mine that you don't have something equipped. This is really easy to do. I just forgot to equip the sword on Ventress in D&D Beyond, so just make sure that you have that equipped. It's worth noting that the Argon Combat HUD is not going to automatically put that up there until you replace the character, but you can also just drag the rapier over here and then it will fill out your bar properly. And that's important because if we're going to be using Booming Blade, it's going to ask us about our equipped weapons. But now we actually have the choice for rapier. And we've got all of that great automation and animation ready to go. Now, Ventress is also a swashbuckler rogue, so let's see if we can't get a hit to actually land here on this bandit. And there we go. And you can see that because Ventress is a swashbuckler, he gets sneak attack as long as there's not another enemy by him. And it even prompts us to roll sneak attack damage, and it will handle that and scale it with your rogue levels appropriately. In addition to all that scaling, you can see if you go up to the chat card where this actually came in, you can see how it was all calculated. So you've got the D6, or the D8 rather, of the rapier rolled a 6. And you can see the 2D6 from sneak attack and also Ventress's dexterity modifier here to give us our total damage. So you can see all that nice and incorporated, and with MIDI, we've got our settings set up so that we can apply and undo all of these different bits if, someone hit a button that they didn't mean to, you accidentally double-clicked attacks, whatever it may be. That way you can back out of those certain things. One of the great aspects of this loadout here is that there's a lot of customization for your players to express themselves and their character's individuality. We're using automated animations, so there's some customization there, but also Chris's Premades has a lot of configuration options as well. So if we take a look at Ventress, he has this feature to summon a tentacle here as a Fathomless Warlock. And if there is the Chris's Premade icon here and it is blue, that means there is some kind of configuration available. So if you click on that, you'll see we have configure here. And now I can set the name of the tentacle here. So we can just call this example, and then we can set custom avatars, etc. And I actually have some of these already copied and pasted over on another document. So I'm just going to grab those rather than go through the process of finding everything. Know that you can use WebMs, but it's not going to show up in this browser. You can instead just copy and paste it. And then once you hit OK, And if you go back to configure, you'll see those fields are still completed. And now if I bring up my Combat HUD and I use this Tentacle of the Deeps summon, we're going to go ahead and use the ability, and I even get a preview, and now I have this spectral tentacle. And if I open it up, it has the icon I specified as well. So you can customize that pretty heavily. And this applies to all of the different customization here. When we look at Gomer and some of his spells, he has Booming Blade just like Ventress. If you want to customize that, direct your players to always click on the med pack or med kit here first and check to see if there's a configure option. If there is a configure option, then that means any of the visuals or animations are being handled by Chris's Premades, Gambit's Premades, or some other kind of script or function that we've got going on rather than automated animations. You'll notice that if we click on this, there's a global recognition in the auto recommendation menu here for Booming Blade, but we have it turned off. You do not want your players to turn that on, otherwise you're going to start playing multiple animations and it's going to get kind of sloppy looking. So if there is that blue medkit, then use configure. If there's not a blue medkit, like on Tosh's Caustic Brew here, you'll see that when we click on it, there is no configure option, and instead that is handled by automated animations. And then your players can customize things to express their characters. So the way they would normally do that is to copy from the auto recommendation, and this is going to give you kind of the best starting point. And then they can select customize item, and they can adjust this so that, say, this is going to be purple. We've got videos on automated animations, so if you want a more in-depth look, you can take a look there. Right now, we're just going to do this as a basic demonstration. I don't have this prepared, so I'm going to go ahead and cast it from the sheet. And we'll see this is now purple instead of green. So you can still have your players express themselves and customize their characters that way. And this is going to be just for Gomer, another person casting Tosh's Caustic Brew, or another warlock summoning a spectral tentacle. It's going to have different icons and different setups compared to that baseline if they've customized them. With our players taken care of, now let's go ahead and take a look at bringing in monsters. So first, we're going to go to our companions directory. And using D&D Beyond, we're going to click on this DDB Muncher here. And the important thing here is on this general setting, you want to hit Use Automation Effects from Chris's Premades. And so that's going to actually pull from Chris's Premades, and because we have Chris's Premades also pointing at the MIDI Community Showcase and Gambit's Premades, it'll bring those in as well. This is important for when we go to munch things in, it's going to be pulling from the right places. So you'll notice if you go to monsters, you have to make sure that you have imported spells before monsters. So we'll first need to go over to our spell effect, make sure that we have this create automation effects for spells turned on. Then you can choose whether to include homebrew or only import homebrew spells. And then we'll go ahead and click on spell munch. This may take a little bit of time depending upon how many spells you have on D&D Beyond, but then it will bring those in with all of their automations. Note that when there's updates to Chris's Premades or Gambits or the MIDI Community Showcase, and sometimes D&D Beyond itself, you may have to remunch all of your spells just to make sure that you have the latest versions of those effects. So check change logs whenever there's updates to those, and you can make sure that you're on the latest versions. Once you have spells brought in, we'll go ahead and grab the monsters, and again, make sure this generate automation effects is turned on. And then we can go ahead and click Monster Munch. The Monster Munch may take a little bit longer as the monsters are actors coming in and they have more data on them than just items. So we'll be right back after this is finished. Once our monster import is finished, we can go ahead and go into this D&D Beyond folder, and there's all these compendiums where these things have been brought in. You can first take a look at the spells, and these are going to have all of the automations that are from Chris's Premades, Gambit's Premades, and also from D&D Beyond's implementation of that. The D&D Beyond importer has a lot of those community automation effects set up for them using DAE, etc. And so if you want to build a character from scratch without someone building it on D&D Beyond, they can drag these spells over to their sheets. And you can apply the same thing with items too. But within the monsters, you can see we've got all of the monsters we own on D&D Beyond in here, and they're going to have all of their different automation features already taken care of. So for example, if we look at this assassin, they're going to have on sneak attack, they have the Chris's Premades automation ready to go. So as a demonstration, I can go ahead and drag out the assassin and target poor Gomer here. And to demonstrate, we'll just attack with advantage until we end up getting a hit, and we'll show off that that sneak attack is in fact working. And that's going to hurt quite a bit, I would imagine. So if we use the sneak attack, we can see this is completely integrated and good to go. And poor Gomer is having a very bad time as he has failed his con save and taken a critical hit with sneak attack damage. But this assassin is completely ready to go, and the same thing is true for all of my D&D Beyond monsters. You can also see this applies to spellbooks, etc. For example, Magic Missile is good to go, etc. So all of the automation is already prepared, ready for you to use on all of your monsters. It's really easy to bring all of this in. Even with that waiting time that we took off screen, it took me maybe 2 minutes to bring in over 500 different monsters here from D&D Beyond with all of their automation already included. Obviously, when I'm using these in the game, I'm probably going to want to go ahead and update their artwork so that I'm not using this image of a assassin's blade for my assassin, but an actual token. But that is easily remedied and takes a lot less time than setting up all of these automated pieces. And so that's how you bring in all of these characters and monsters using the D&D Beyond importer. When it comes time to update, say your players have leveled up and they're using D&D Beyond to do so, you simply turn on the edit mode and click on the D&D Beyond importer again, and you can start the import again. You may want to adjust what things are going to be updated depending upon what you're bookkeeping purely in Foundry and what you're sending back to D&D Beyond. But that is a simple process there. For monsters and spells, when you go into your D&D Beyond Muncher, you'll notice that the setting for update existing things is by default off. So that means if you go to munch something, it's only going to bring in new content that you have. If there is an update to some of the different automations, for example, from Chris's Premades, they now support a new spell or they do it in a different way, then you'll want to turn this on to update existing things and go through on the spells to make sure that that is all updated. But once you have that, you're good to go. If there is another update to Chris's Premades or something like that, then you can also click on the character sheets and run the medkit from here. And this process is pretty similar to how you would do this without using the D&D Beyond importer. So that's how you can bring in all of these different automations ready to go on these characters and monsters if you're using D&D Beyond. But what if you're not using D&D Beyond? As a demonstration here, we'll go ahead and go into the 5e SRD content. This comes bundled with the system. When you install it on Foundry, we'll go ahead and bring in Akra, this human cleric, and we'll bring in Riswin, this dwarf rogue. So when I look at Akra's sheet here and I go over to the spells and I take a look at Bless, this has the Chris's Premade icon indicating that there is automation available. Now, I can click on this and I can replace this. I can go down the line and check everything that needs it. And maybe my players should do this every now and then, at least with their bread and butter spells and features, also to make sure that they're up to date. But if I just brought in a character, I just built them out, or I'm just now converting to all this automation, that can be a little tedious. So instead, you can click on the Chris's Premade medkit up here on the character sheet. And what this will do is actually go through and apply all of the automations to the actor. So if we hit yes, it's going to replace things. And if we go into our sidebar, it'll actually tell you everything that got updated. So for example, if we take a look at Shield of Faith, you can see now that we have the Chris's Premade icon, and it's got that green color to it, so we're in the clear. Note that sometimes on some of these, this might show up as yellow still, but it has some of these entries here. And that usually means that there are multiple versions of command going on. And so you have the option to choose whether you're going to replace the existing automation with it with one from, say, Gambits, etc. So you can go through and do that. But this giving you the list of everything that's replaced gives you a nice short list of things that you may want to switch out for. And you can see that if we go ahead and grab Riswin as well, and we look at his features, you can see that he's got sneak attack. It's not finished there, but if I go ahead and click on the medkit and I replace everything, we now have this updated sneak attack. Additionally, let's say he was missing sneak attack, or you're doing something odd like adding sneak attack to him. We can go ahead and add a new bit a feature here, and we can just name it sneak attack. And because everything works off of name recognition, when we create this item, we can see already that when we hit enter and save the name, that now this medkit icon is up and we can update and replace the item. It's not going to change the artwork on it, but it is going to add in the Chris's pre-made automations, etc. So that's how you can both update individual features and also update entire sheets for characters. And you can apply this same logic to individual NPCs. So for example, we have an assassin that I brought from the SRD rather than imported with D&D Beyond. And we can see on sneak attack, it has automation available. I could update that individually, or I can use the medkit here and replace it. And now we have sneak attack ready to go. Of course, if you're just now switching to using all of this automation, you might already have a lot of different monsters and their features going on in your world. So I've gone ahead and imported the entire human folder from the SRD here. So this is a new assassin that does not have their sneak attack updated yet. And same thing with, say, the Archmage here. His spell book doesn't have all of the different automations set up for it already. So we have all of these monsters that we've already brought in, whether that was from the SRD or monsters we created, etc. If we go to our game settings and configure, under Chris's Premades at the very bottom, we actually have this NPC updater. And this is going to bulk update all of these different NPCs we've got. So you can update your sidebar NPCs. If you click go, it's going to start, and so just wait until it's complete. And then if we go back and take a look at our assassin again, we'll see that for his sneak attack, it has been updated. Similarly to sometimes when you do bulk updates to an entire character sheet, you might get old versions that will bring in either item macros or DAE and will still indicate that there is an update available. If so, just go ahead and click on the medkit icon here. They should still function, but they might not be using the most up-to-date piece. That's just good practice to double check that in certain situations. So if something's not working like you think it should, double check that sheet really quick. What's also great is that you can update the current scene NPC. So if you already have a bunch of SRD monsters on the scene, then that will get taken care of as well. So if I go into my SRD here and I bring out, say, a couple assassins. Or actually, let's go with Archmages here. And we'll notice that if we open up the Archmage and we look in their spellbook, things like Magic Missile are not updated. But then if I update current scene NPCs, and we take a look, we'll see that now the Magic Missile has been updated. So you can also use this to crawl your entire world, either that scene or all of your scenes, to bring all of your NPCs up to snuff with Chris's Premades and Gambit's Premades. Once you've updated everything, then the customization process is much the same, whether that's for your monsters or for your players. Again, you'll go in to edit the items, click on the medkit if it's available, and check to see for that configure option. If it's not there, then you can use automated animations to customize it instead. One caveat with doing this manually and not using the D&D Beyond importer is that the D&D Beyond importer actually has a lot of different automations built into it. They've been creating custom automations using MIDI and DAE, etc. for a long time. So if you're not using the D&D Beyond importer, there may be automations for some features, spells, racial abilities, what have you, that are not present using Chris's Premades, Gambits, or the MIDI Community Showcase. Those last three do cover the vast majority of things that you would need to or want to automate in 5e, but just be aware that there might be a couple gaps or a couple differences between someone using D&D Beyond Importer and someone not using the D&D Beyond Importer. Now that we've got everything set up, let's take a look at combat with all of these automations. So if we put everyone into the combat state, our combat carousel comes up right here. We'll go ahead and roll all of their initiatives, and then we can begin the combat. So there'll be a lot of targeting and everything that's setting up the attacks of opportunity through Gambit's Premades. So to begin, we'll go with the Archmage here, and we'll have him cast Magic Missile. I can hold down Shift while hitting T to have multiple targets here, and I'm going to go ahead and cast Magic Missile at a much higher level. We'll go ahead and use 7th. You can see I can assign how many bolts I want to send each way. Once I have all of the bolts assigned, it plays these beautiful animations targeting each person with the appropriate amount of bolts. And you can see that it's applying the right amount of damage. Basically, it's treating each bolt as a separate instance. And as the GM, you can apply and undo all of these as you see fit. By default, they're going to go ahead and apply since we're using those Midi-QoL settings. But if you wanted to undo them, you could as well. One thing to note when you're running combats in Midi, if you hit undo at some point here, it's going to undo quite a ways back. So for example, we have Ventress is at 22 health. If I go and I undo the very first bolt that hit him instead of the last, he's going to be back at full health rather than as if just one of those bolts didn't actually hit him. So then you've got to go back through and then reapply on all of these in order to have everything updated. So that's just one thing to keep in mind when you're using undo and things like that. Next, we'll have Ventress go ahead and step up. And you'll see that when I move these characters, there is this little template, and that is from the Gambit's Premades attack of opportunity, so you can see their range as they're moving around. We'll go ahead and have him attack the Archmage here. And on a successful hit, because he is a swashbuckler rogue, he doesn't need to have advantage to get sneak attack, and everything is already accounted for with that. So we can go ahead and select the sneak attack and apply that. And then similarly, because he's a swashbuckler, he can take a step back from someone he's hit in melee this turn without provoking attacks of opportunity, so he doesn't have to worry about that. Now let's take a look at Gomer. If Gomer steps up to the assassin to take a hit at him, we can go ahead and use his signature Booming Blade here. And the Archmage actually has a counterspell, and that's going to pop up and ask if we want to use it. I'll go ahead and say no. You can also select pause if you need to think about it, so that's a great feature there. And unfortunately, Gomer is going to miss on his Booming Blade and Thunder Gauntlets. Since he's missed, maybe we'll go ahead and use a bonus action here. And then we'll end our turn. And now it's the assassin's time. So to demonstrate an opportunity attack, if the assassin wants to ignore Gomer here and head over towards Ventress, then Gomer is going to get a similar pop-up here for if he wants to use his opportunity attack with the Thunder Gauntlets. So we'll go ahead and say yes. And this actually hits him, which is going to show off the ability of Thunder Gauntlets. So Thunder Gauntlets normally gives the person attacking disadvantage on attacks on anyone other than the person who hit them with the Thunder Gauntlets. So if he doesn't attack Gomer, he's going to have disadvantage. Let's see that in action. So we can see here that he had disadvantage. Unfortunately, poor Ventress here still got hit and hurt pretty bad. So Ventress is not looking great. And now we come back to the Archmage, and we can see if we go ahead and use this here Lightning Bolt, we get our targeting template here to see who all is going to get hit. So this is great for if you're wanting to maximize the amount of people who are going to be damaged, or you're trying to avoid hitting your friends. So we'll just send this straight at Gomer here. And we've got these great animations and everything is being applied. For the sake of keeping things going, we'll go ahead and undo that so that poor Gomer here isn't dead already. For Ventress, we are going to use his Booming Blade here. Again, we can use Sneak Attack. And since we've got Booming Blade, this has actually applied the Booming Blade debuff to the assassin. And we'll even use this bonus action to summon his little tentacle that can reduce speed and everything. So with the tentacle, it's actually going to be on Ventress, but as a part of summoning it, you can also make a melee spell attack with it. So we'll go ahead and use the attack action here. And you can see that we have damaged the assassin with the tentacle. One thing to note is that this has an indicator of some cover, And that is because we have NPCs and tokens giving cover. So you may want to adjust that setting or turn that off if you don't want them to be giving cover. It especially plays a little funky with these characters who have summons that they make the attacks for. With that, then Adventures is going to back up a bit. And let's take a look at Gomer and a concentration effect. So Gomer's going to carefully make sure that he is not provoking the attack of opportunity. We'll say in this case that he actually skirted the edge here. And we'll go ahead and use Tasha's Caustic Brew. And we've still got that purple effect from earlier. It looks like everybody made their saves, but that is okay. We'll go ahead and end Gomer's turn. And we'll have the assassins step up to Gomer, and we'll see what it looks like when we have concentration. First up, Boom and Blade's firing, and the assassin moved willingly, so they're going to take the damage. So that's already completely implemented, and you'll notice that he has the active effect that is causing him to be slower from the spectral tentacle. So now when he takes a swing on Gomer, we'll see if he actually manages to hit here. We'll see we're applying all that damage, and then Gomer is automatically going to make his concentration check, and it looks like he passed. Not that holding concentration on Tasha's Caustic Cauldron is doing a whole lot for him right now, but it is showing that he will get prompted for the concentration check, and it's actually going to give you the proper DC for these damaging instances. And that's kind of the basics of what combat looks like with all of these great automation suites. You can continue running through this as normal. Obviously, if you had your players here, this would be a little more fluid for going through the different turns. But you can see we've got great visual effects in the form of automated animations and some built-in sequencer macros and functions with all of our automation suites. And we've also got a lot of great bookkeeping. So instead of focusing on the rules of the game, we can just focus on playing the game and helping tell a wonderful story with our players. And that's going to conclude our discussion and showcase of the Ultimate Combat Automation Suite for Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition in Foundry Virtual Tabletop. Hopefully this has shown you some new toys and some new techniques to make this very easy for you, whether you already have your game heavily automated or you've chosen to take the plunge thanks to this video. In the comments, let us know what you're most excited to automate using the techniques shown in this video. And let us know if there's another automation suite or component that you think we should add for combat in DnD5e. Again, this has been Zephyr with the Bailey Wiki channel. If you enjoyed this video, then subscribe to keep up with all of our latest content and hit the bell to be notified whenever we upload a new video. Also, consider becoming a patron. Not only do you support the channel, but you also gain access to all of the modular systems and scenes that we've made for Foundry VTT, including all of these gorgeous maps that you've seen in the background here today. Again, this has been Zephyr. Thank you so much for watching, happy gaming, and have a good one.